Good afternoon, friends. I am here to tell you a story. So once upon a time, there were 3 brothers, and they were off on a journey. They were traveling across Ireland on their horses. Now, they'd been riding all day, and they'd run out of water, and they were so thirsty. They were incredibly thirsty. They were tired. It was getting near to the end of the day, and they were just looking everywhere for a stream or a brook or a well or somewhere that they could get a drink. But they just couldn't find anywhere. And the sun was starting to set. The sun was going down over the Galtee Mountains, and they were so weary when finally, on the top of a hill, they saw what looked like a well. "Oh, finally," said the oldest brother, and he jumped down from his horse and he started to walk up the hill. The other brothers followed him, and when they got to the top of the hill, they saw that indeed there was a well there. But standing in front of it was an old woman. Now, this was no ordinary old woman. She was old as time itself. She was decrepit. She was ugly. She was hideous. She was the most repulsive looking woman you have ever seen in your life. And the 3 brothers kind of looked at each other and they were like, well, here goes nothing. So the oldest brother, he walked up to the old hag and he said, "Excuse me, ma'am, but do you think we might be able to have a drink from your well? We've been traveling all day and we're so thirsty." The old woman looked at him and she said, "Well, 3 fine young men come to my well at last. Indeed, you may drink of this water, but first, you must kiss me." Well, the oldest brother took another look at the repulsive, horrible-looking woman standing before him with her long yellow fingernails and her skin falling off her face and her hunched back, and he said, "You know what? I'm not actually that thirsty after all. I think I'll just go back down the hill and find somewhere to camp." So he turned around and left. And that night he tossed and turned. He was so cold and thirsty, he had the worst sleep of his life. Now, the second brother was a little bit craftier, and he thought he could trick the old woman. So he came up to her and quickly he just pecked her on the cheek. But she was having none of it. That would not suffice. Clearly, she had more in mind, and she dismissed him with a wave of her hand. So the second brother too walked down the hill with his horse, and he had the coldest, loneliest night of his life, so thirsty yet unable to drink from the well. Now the third brother approached the woman. This brother, his name was Niall. Later, he would become known as Niall of the 9 Hostages, which is another story. He gazed into the eyes of the old woman, and they were milky blue, almost like she was half blind already, and he gazed onto her horrible, hideous face. And then he took her in his arms, and he lifted her into the air, and he spun her around, and slowly he kissed her. Now, as he was kissing her, something started to happen. Slowly, she started to shapeshift into a beautiful young woman. And by the time the kiss was over, standing before him was the most lovely young maiden he had ever seen. Her eyes were like dewdrops in the fresh spring of a Irish morning, and her hair was long and flowed about her like a newly sprung river, and her body was young, her skin was soft, and she looked at him with love in her eyes. He stared at her in shock and said, "Who are you?" "Niall," she said, "my name is Sovereignty." After having revealed herself to him, she took him to her well, and she filled his bucket, and he drank and drank and drank, and never had water tasted so good in his life. Then she took him to her campsite, and she built a fire, and there he spent the most wonderful night of his life in her arms. In the morning, as dawn was breaking and the sun was flowing over the Galtee Mountains, she looked at him and she said, "Niall, you shall become the king. You shall become High King of all Ireland." And this indeed is what happened. And that's the story of Niall of the 9 Hostages and the Lady Sovereignty. I hope you all enjoyed it. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for listening. Bye.